I'm Pamela, 30 years old, and married to Patrick for 3 years now. We don't have children yet, and our lives took an unexpected turn after Patrick's father, Jesse, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. We were living in another state at the time, and the news came as a complete shock. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle subtly suggested that Patrick, being the youngest and only son, should move back home to support his mother. A few months later, Patrick told me he had arranged a transfer to an office closer to his family's home. He made the decision on his own and informed me afterward, which upset me. A decision of this magnitude should have involved both of us. When I expressed my frustration, Patrick apologized and admitted he had expected me to be upset. He knew about the strained relationship I had with his mother, Mary, which, to be honest, had always been difficult. When we lived farther away, visits were sparse, mostly due to work schedules, and Mary often voiced her displeasure. She would compare us to Patrick's sisters, Amanda and Diane, who lived nearby and visited frequently. Despite the distance, Patrick always defended our situation. Our relationship with Mary had always been tense, but manageable. Her main issue with me seemed to be our lack of children. Once, during a visit, she bluntly questioned me about it, even making embarrassing comparisons to others. Reluctantly, I agreed to move closer, reasoning that we wouldn't be living together constantly. Surprisingly, Mary seemed pleased. 3 weeks later, she invited me over for tea, and for the first time, I accepted. When I arrived, Mary and Amanda greeted me at the door. "Pamela, it's been forever. Why haven't you visited since moving here?" Amanda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I already regretted coming. Inside, Mary's tone was almost too cheerful. "I was so happy when you decided to move closer, but it seems I was wrong. You don't like me, do you?" I almost wanted to confirm her suspicions just to see her reaction, but I held back. "It's not that. I've just been feeling a bit off, adjusting to the new place," I explained, which was partially true. I had been feeling fatigued, and Patrick hadn't mentioned this visit to me. "How can you say that?" Mary accused. "You don't like me, but wasn't it really the other way around?" Amanda snapped. "You owe her an apology. Tell her you're sorry." I braced myself for Mary to react with anger, but instead, she surprised me. "You're right, I've been difficult. I'm sorry, Pamela. I shouldn't have pried into your personal life." I was waiting for a hidden jab, but there was none. Even Amanda seemed taken aback. "I only wanted a grandchild," Mary confessed. She explained that Amanda's husband was infertile, and Diane had fertility struggles. She had pinned her hopes on Patrick and me. We had discussed having children, so I reassured her. "Please, just give us some time," I said, lowering my head slightly. Despite everything, I felt a strange obligation to keep the peace. "I'm sorry," I added, "but please do visit us from time to time." Mary and Amanda went back to watching TV, sipping their tea, as if the tension had never existed. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked, watching a local TV show. "She's so lively and bright." As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder if things could have been different if I had tried harder to connect with Mary. It was a fleeting, naive thought, but it lingered. Later that evening, when Patrick came home, he was visibly upset. I talked to Mom. "She's crying, Pamela. What did you say to her?" I was taken aback. Just hours earlier, Patrick had left with a smile, and now he seemed furious. "Patrick, it's a misunderstanding," I explained, trying to clarify. "I didn't say I didn't want to get along. I just told her it's hard given our past." But Patrick didn't seem to want to hear it. He seemed to believe his mother's version of events, and I felt the gap between us widening. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here, you need to be more patient." Patrick glanced at me, as if echoing Amanda's words. "But I didn't move here to please his family. I came because I wanted to be with him." "I'm sorry, but maybe you should consider someone your mother likes more," I said. Before the word divorce slipped out, Patrick's face changed instantly. "Wait, what? Divorce? I just want you to get along with my family," he said, clearly confused. He couldn't understand that his family might never fully accept me, and I didn't know how to make him see it. The next day, Patrick came home late and shared a conversation he'd had with his mother. She had apologized, acknowledging the misunderstanding. "What a fuss," Patrick muttered. He also mentioned that Mary's birthday was coming up and suggested celebrating it at a fancy restaurant. I was still reeling from the previous day's events, but it was clear Patrick was trying to smooth things over. He even proposed that we present the birthday dinner as my idea, hoping it would shift his mother's perception of me. Although I was skeptical, I agreed to make the reservation, unsure of whether Mary would truly appreciate the gesture. Amanda and their spouses were already seated when the host led Patrick and me to our table, casting a glance that made my discomfort even more pronounced. "Happy birthday, Mary," I greeted her cheerfully, hoping to break the ice, but Mary didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, she turned to the others, thanking them for being there to celebrate with her. It felt intentional, like a slap in the face. Amanda seemed confused. "I thought this was supposed to be a family gathering," she remarked, her eyes briefly flicking to me. Diane, noticing the tension, glanced over with concern. That was when it hit me, this wasn't just a cold reception, I was being deliberately excluded. Determined not to let it ruin my evening, I decided I'd just keep to myself and leave early, but as I was settling into this decision, a staff member approached our table with an awkward air. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people, he informed us." Puzzled, I responded, "I distinctly reserved for 8. Are you sure there's no mistake?" "No, it's definitely for 8, I insisted, recalling the conversation I had with the restaurant. The staff member paused and then added, "Actually, about a week ago, we received a call requesting the change to 7. I turned to Patrick, searching for an explanation. His response made my blood run cold. "Yes, please, service for 7, he said flatly, confirming the change without hesitation. I was stunned. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Patrick had made the change without consulting me, and it was clear now that, despite his promises to smooth things over with his family, he was playing along with their game. His actions felt like betrayal, and it was difficult to shake off the feeling that I was merely a pawn in his efforts to keep the peace. Before I could process everything, Patrick turned to me with a glare. "I heard from Mom that you've been talking behind my back, saying I don't make enough money and that I'm insensitive. What's all this about?" he demanded. It turned out that when Patrick had called Mary about the reservation, she had filled his ears with lies, and angry and trusting her blindly, he had pretended to be me when calling the restaurant to change the reservation from 8 to 7. The staff, recognizing the family surname, had processed the change without question. I couldn't believe how easily Patrick had been manipulated, and the realization left me questioning why I was even here. When I confronted him, demanding he apologize to everyone present and reflect on his actions, his response was unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to his family instead and go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't apologize for things I hadn't said, nor could I accept a husband who would take his mother's word over mine. Tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. What had I been thinking? Following him here? Seeing my distress, Patrick started to panic, but it was too late. Mary, sitting off to the side, watched the exchange with a smug smile, clearly enjoying every moment of her scheme coming to fruition. I spoke coldly, my voice laced with bitterness. "Maybe next time, marry a younger, more compliant daughter-in-law, then you'll get your grandkids, and you'll be happier." Mary's sharp retort cut through the tension. "Pamela, why don't you just go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is always an outsider. I can't see you as family, you're just not charming enough, so please, leave." Her words stung, but they only strengthened my resolve. "I was planning to leave anyway," I snapped. "It's hard to imagine anyone getting along with someone as twisted as you." With that, I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. Patrick remained silent, his head buried in his hands. Just as I was about to step out, I heard someone calling my name. Diane and her husband were standing in the doorway, looking worried. "Pamela, wait," Diane said, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Amanda haven't changed. I knew all that gossip about you was lies." Diane's words, though small, brought me a sense of comfort in the midst of all the chaos. She was ready to stand up to the family's toxicity, and that gave me a small shred of hope. As I processed what Diane had just said, my phone buzzed. It was Mary's name, flashing on the screen. "Ugh, what now?" I muttered to myself. But before I could answer, Patrick's name replaced hers. Sighing in frustration, I looked at Diane and her husband. They exchanged knowing glances, and Diane spoke up. "Pamela, you might want to go back to the restaurant. Something interesting is about to happen." They left, looking oddly satisfied, and though I hesitated, my curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't resist finding out what was going on. When I returned to the restaurant, The scene that greeted me was completely unexpected. A crowd had gathered around, and the air was thick with tension. Patrick's table was buzzing with tension as a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, held a microphone, her questions sharp and probing. The atmosphere was thick with discomfort, and Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly struggling to explain herself. "No, that's not it. It's all a misunderstanding," she stammered, but the damage had already been done. Patrick and Amanda exchanged awkward glances, their unease evident. They were clearly caught off guard by this unexpected turn of events. The announcer, microphone in hand, pressed Mary further. "You loudly declared in the restaurant that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. What did you mean by that? Can you explain?" Meanwhile, Diane's husband and others who had been offended earlier quietly slipped away, their discomfort palpable. I stood there, trying to make sense of what was happening, realizing that the situation had become a public spectacle, perhaps even live on television. I hadn't even thought to confirm the reservation details in the chaos, and now it was clear that I was at the center of a media frenzy. A staff member, noticing my confusion, approached. "It's been quite a day, hasn't it?" they remarked, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant, which explained the unexpected media presence. Everything had spiraled out of control, and this family drama was now unfolding on live television, casting a spotlight on all of it. As I processed the scene, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of vindication and disbelief. The dining area offered some privacy, but everything was still visible, and it was clear that people were eavesdropping. Just as I stepped out of the spotlight, a famous TV announcer approached Mary with a wide grin, clearly excited about the upcoming interview. "An interview? Absolutely," Mary exclaimed, her enthusiasm palpable. The announcer wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. "The topic today is daughter-in-law and mother-in-law relationships. We heard there was a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. Can you tell us what happened?" Caught off guard by the question, both Mary and Amanda paled, struggling to find the right words. They were stuck in a moment of their own making, unable to openly address the lies and manipulation they had orchestrated. From across the room, Patrick spotted me and called out in desperation. "Pamela, please, I can't let this shame be exposed. It was all a misunderstanding," he pleaded, his voice filled with panic, but by then, any feelings I had for him had long since evaporated. Mary, trying to salvage something, flashed a strained smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela," she said, attempting to shift the conversation. "Pamela, come over here." As I walked toward them, the microphone was quickly directed at me. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law really feel about her mother-in-law?" the announcer asked, pressing me for an answer. "I've never been called that," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Instead, I've been called unpatriotic for not having children yet, which, for the record, is because Patrick and I aren't ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried for over 2 years, but, apparently, that's grounds for divorce." I recounted how, when I first fell ill and had to take time off work, Patrick had been supportive. I had followed him here, hoping the change of environment would help, but in the end, this is what had happened. By this point, I was out of tears, and a sense of detachment had replaced them. Seeing Mary and Amanda squirm in embarrassment gave me a small sense of satisfaction. As I stood there, preparing for the possibility that this could be broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but smile at Mary's distressed expression. "Well, since I'm considered an outsider," I said, "I guess I should leave. Goodbye." With that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the chaos and shouts that followed me. The day had been long and full of conflict, but in that final moment, I felt a sense of relief and release. Walking away from the madness felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized was there. While Mary and her family did manage to stop the broadcast of the footage, the incident had already caused a stir locally. It spread like wildfire, with relatives and acquaintances gossiping about what had unfolded. In the aftermath, I packed up my things and moved back to my parents' house. I sent the divorce papers to Patrick, but his response was delayed, making me consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick showed up at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, who usually remained composed, took charge of the situation with surprising authority. Patrick apologized, promising to sever ties with his family and vowing to trust only me going forward, but the promises felt hollow. Too little, too late. Peter, visibly upset by what Patrick had put me through, didn't hold back. "Why didn't you realize this sooner?" "What have you done to Pamela all these years?" he asked, his tone stern. "Just sign the divorce papers and leave." With a look of regret, Patrick handed over the papers, his handwriting shaky and hard to read. Though it was difficult, the divorce papers were processed successfully. It was later revealed that Amanda's infertility issues were her own, something she had wrongly blamed on her husband. With her own marriage falling apart, Amanda stopped visiting her in-laws. Patrick eventually returned to live with his mother, Mary, in their small hometown. They likely dealt with lingering rumors and uncomfortable gossip, but I had closed that chapter of my life. In the time that followed, I found new happiness. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we married. Our relationship was filled with joy, and we soon welcomed a daughter. We now have a 2-year-old, and I'm expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is a blessing, supportive, kind, everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but at this moment, I feel fulfilled and loved, surrounded by the kind of support I once thought I'd never have.